Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing well. Let's continue our reading of Hamza's Yusuf commentary on Imam Mawlud's Matharat al Qulub. It has been nerdy and I've been reading it for quite some time and it has caused much introspection, so hopefully it'll do the same for you. Let's begin. Alright, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. If there is much corruption in a given generation, it is best to be wary of people until their goodness becomes manifest. So again, some basic common sense here. This is the advice of the scholars. There are many people who have no qualms about deceiving and cheating people. Yeah, that's quite true. They will adorn their faces with smiles and communicate that they are wonderful people. But they will cheat a person when the opportunity arises. Yeah, that whole adorn their faces with smiles is, to me, the corporate LinkedIn people, right? Those are the ones who I'm the most suspicious of. That is my bias, but I would argue that you really got to be careful of those types. Scholars also say that one should be circumspect with the dispensation of zakah. Okay, so to really check it out, make sure it's getting to where it's got to go, essentially. In times in which goodness prevails over corruption, the default is to accept the word of people who claim they qualify for zakah and ask for it. So here, really seeing if someone qualifies for your charity. Very good. You know, it's really sad. There's a lot of scammy GoFundMe stuff. It's quite sad. However, when corruption and fraud are prevalent, then those responsible are obliged to be rigorous in their investigation. So here, you see just the responsibility of finances. And if you know you're in a time of mass corruption, then you need to really check, and then check again. Very common sense advice. Unfortunately, some people will often present themselves as mired in poverty, though they are well off. Charity is considered a trust from God. Okay, so charity is considered a trust from God, and its dispensation must be done with care. Having doubts about people is different from decidedly judging them negatively. Okay, so here we go. Because today you hear a lot of "don't judge me," which sometimes that phrase gets mixed up a lot because it's like some people are finger pointers, but they never notice that when they're pointing their finger, you got 3 fingers pointing back at you. It's important to, like, you may have faults and you see someone doing something, you might be like, hey, you know, this, and that. There's a balance, right? To keep people in check. But I think there are some people who go above and beyond to be the patroller, right? So I think for me, when I think about how you can have a doubt, but you are not just firm in like your total judgment and then dismiss that person, right? Because what I get with working with a lot of people, you know, first impressions when you're trying to train somebody, their behavior, you're like, okay, this person might be good, they might have something going wrong with them this day, let's give them another chance. Allow them to have a bad day, but you have to make sure that your judgment of them is, you know, without a doubt it's there. So if you know an employee is stealing things, you've caught them, you have a reasonable position to doubt trusting them in the future with a position that handles the cash drawer, right? But if someone looks like poor, maybe they didn't iron their shirt very well that morning, don't assume that they're like some bum all the time. Maybe they just ran out of time that day to iron their shirt, right? So I think that he has a point here. You can have doubts, but don't just like start making things up out of the blue because you perceive and assume, right? Back it up with some type of evidence and such. That's what I'm getting from it. Forming a bad opinion in the presence of ample evidence is common sense. True. However, when people repent, they should not have their past held against them. So here, this is something that I was really thinking about when it comes to women who are feeling inferior. Right? Especially with some other types of YouTubers who call women toxic trash for coming from single motherhood lines, right? We have to recognize that some people have been forgiven. They've repented. And if you keep throwing it back in their face, how are they going to have some type of love in their life? I know in my own personal family, some would complain, hey, I'm different now, they would say, and so, whenever we fight, they always bring up my past, right? And I'd be like, they have a point, but when women fight especially, they throw past in the face a lot. Women do that a lot. I don't know what it is about us women, but we can remember something a guy did, like you're with your partner or whatever, your cousin, whatever, and they did something 4 years ago, and you bring it up in the middle of a fight. Like, it's so strange, but you won't remember what you ate for breakfast, but you can remember that sleight of hand that you got like 4 years ago. So here, it reminds us, like, someone's repented, you ain't gotta always bring it up, unless it's, like, really pertinent to the situation, I'd argue, right? Like, if someone's known as a man who beats women, he's repented, you can still, I think, hold that against him for legitimate reasons. Like, hey, you sure you want to marry this guy? He's got a reputation for beating the snot out of women. He's got an anger problem, right? He's repented, but the capability is still there, right? A hadith says, there are two things no believer has been given anything better than: a good opinion of God and a good opinion of the servants of God. Now this is a very good point, because if you notice, a lot of people want God to be soft, pacifist, and just the word love. And anything that goes outside of this weird, strange, new age definition of God, they see as wicked, cruel, and satanic. So they ignore Iblis and the dark arts, hyper-focus on the strictness and firmness of God, right? And they start having a negative opinion about God, and then project that onto everyone else to then have that same negative opinion. Rather, when I see something that I don't understand, right, you have to kind of just think, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows more than us. Let's try to figure it out. But at the end of the day, we don't know. And we got to just keep on keeping on. Because there are capacities within us that can't really get that. And people think, oh, that's an insult. Why didn't God create us to understand this? It's like, at a certain day, you're going to be at the moment when you learn something. And then later, you'll be like, I don't know. And it's best to just leave it, right? Like, I don't know how a tree forms its bark, There's certain things that you just don't know. So whenever we find ourselves having a negative opinion of God, I think deep introspection on how your own hands could brought this element to be, brought the situation to be what you could have done differently, that to me is something that can help. Really help, right? What do you think, fam? And then, a good opinions of the servants of God. This one is a little difficult, right? You want to have that, and you want to have it in your heart, but at the same time you see the constant failure. So it's hard not to become nihilistic in that sense. I can testify to that, most definitely. So that one you definitely got to work on. According to sacred law, people are innocent until proven guilty. It's interesting he says sacred law, because that's also in secular law. This relates to having a good opinion of God. A hadith states that God says, I am in the opinion of my servant. Oh yeah, I remember that. I am as you think of me. MashaAllah. If he thinks well of me, he finds good. If he thinks ill of me, he finds evil. Another hadith states, if someone finds good, let him thank God. And whoever finds other than that, let him blame his own soul. Yeah, so what your own hands brought forth. Which is very difficult because we have a hard time seeing, like, this is also a test. It's also the color. It's also the destiny that has been written for you. But you still had a hand in that, right? I think we all... Ooh, I need water. Can think of that. Ooh. The Prophet, peace be upon him, also said that the affair of believers is all good. even if something unpleasant occurs, there is good in it. I can agree with that, definitely. Because you can learn from the most rough situations, most definitely. I think we all have. Whew. I mean, how many people have had their lives changed because of this recent oppression, medical oppression, fascism regime? A lot of people have, right? So a lot of people lost their businesses. A lot of people moved. And they're starting new lives, and some people even quit their old jobs and they're like, you know what, I actually like spending time with my family. I'm actually gonna, reform my life, and maybe I don't like living in a tiny apartment and paying, $2,000 a month to live in a crap hole city where there's homeless people and gangs everywhere. Maybe I do want to go back out to the country and be around nature more, right? So tons of people have really grown from this recent test and trial, right? It's really fascinating. It's unpleasant, right? But there's always the sun at the end of a storm. Very awesome. What do you think, fam? So he just reminded us that we have to pay attention to who we give our zakat to. You have to investigate it. If we know that we live in a time of mass corruption and fraud, we really got to do our due diligence, really investigate. And we also have to recognize that people will adorn their faces with smiles, and they are criminals. Just look at politicians. Gavin Newsom, right? Someone who can smile and uses a lot of hair gel, but is utterly corrupt. At least with the stone-faced, mean politician, you're like, yeah, I kind of expected that. But one thing I've learned about being around liberals is they're masters of talking like this and then bringing you in, and then they signed you this, and they're gonna pass this law that oppresses you, but since they talk like this, they have the element of elegance, and if you disagree with them, well, you're the bad one, even though they want to oppress you. But if they talk to you like this, instead of having force in their voice, then you will believe them, and they will come off as kind, and you will let them in because of the tone, and it won't trigger your alarm systems in your brain about maybe they're trying to deceive you, as long as they keep their voice down like this instead of just speaking to you in a normal manner. Right? So it is brilliant. Yeah. See, that's why I like reading all kinds of books, because you get to yeah, I feel you. What do you think, fam?